We're now in an evolution of we've been so free for so long that people don't know what I've been through. They don't know what it takes to be free. And they take it so much for granted. They won't know until they have to go through the hard time.
Welcome, everybody, to the Warrior Podcast. My name is Frank Lardino. I'll be your host and creator of the Warrior Podcast. And today we have a true warrior on the podcast. He is the author of the book on full automatic, surviving 13 months in Vietnam. This man was in the Marine Corps, and Marines are Marines for life. He tells an amazing story of all the stuff they went through in Vietnam. And today's going to share some of his stories. It is my great honor to welcome Mr. William Taylor, Jr. Welcome, Mr. Taylor. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Frank, for having me on your program. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure being here.
Awesome, Bill. So we're going to talk a lot about what's in the book, but what I would like to do is tell me why you wrote the book.
You know, I wrote the book. It's something that's deep inside you. When you go through a combat situation that I was in, you feel like it's that PTSD that's sitting inside you. And when you first come home, that feeling is more like you did something wrong or there's something not right. You just can't talk about it. It's so severe at times with a lot of different people. With me, it was something that was deep inside, and I wanted to get the story out, but I had, when we first came home from Vietnam, it was, it wasn't a good country for us to be in. The fact is that I remember when I came home and walked off the airplane, what happened, I got off the airplane, and you got off on a tarmac. You had stairs brought up back then. And I swore to myself, the first thing I was going to do when I got home was to kiss the ground. And so as we're filing off the airplane and people in front of me, I broke the line that was going into the terminal. I went right on my hands and knees, and I gave this ground in California the biggest kiss you can't even imagine. And I got up with a big smile on my face, and people are like, what the heck? And, I was still in my utilities. So I got it back in line. I was smiling, and I was walking into the airport. And that's when I got into the airport, there was somebody had yelled, "Hey, look at the baby killer." And I remember looking at him and like getting tunnel vision and just thinking about all those guys that died and all those guys that gave their lives. And I really felt just horrific inside. And I didn't, I joined for 4 years, so I still had like 2.5 years left. And it was a long time. When I got home, it was like there was no jobs available. All the jobs were for other people. And I had struggled to get a job in the job market back in 1970. What I remember is the fact that it was really it was terrible, the whole thing. And as time went on, I eventually got married and I started moving on. And my children asked me, "Dad, what did you do in the war?" And of course, I wanted to clam up just like all the others had done. And I remembered that my dad, before I joined the Marines, I had asked him a million times about what did you do in the war, and he wouldn't even say. I heard from my uncle he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. He was with Patton, and that he was heroic and
brutal.
It was brutal, and he didn't want to talk about it. And now my kids are asking me, and I went through something pretty horrific also. So I just started opening up to my kids, and that was the beginning when I realized I need to write a book. I need to put this all in writing, and I need to do it. And of course, it took me 50 years to finally get to that point. But I did get to the point. I did research. I worked hard. It took me 3.5 years to write it. It took me a year to write it. It took me 2.5 to go edit it over and over. And it was a roller coaster ride because it wasn't just tell the story. It was tell the story and cry. tell the story and cry. And then once the book was completely completed, then I had to edit and I'd talk about edit and cry and over
Oh
and
my
over.
God.
And then after a time, all of a sudden the tears started to dissipate. And then as I started finishing the book, it's like I'm just telling the story. And that's why I can start talking about what happened. And that's why a lot of other guys really can't, because there's a lot of pain involved in that process.
So the process of writing the book was actually you were systematically releasing all the stuff that you had inside you, right? Is that how you would look at it?
I would say I was healing myself. It was very cathartic, very, the word is healing. It just healed me. And since the writing the book, I've lost 50 pounds. It's like taking this big weight off my shoulders. It's helped me. I have diabetes, and it's like calmed the diabetes down tremendously. And I did it with just low carb and just it's so much easier now for some reason. And I think it's writing the book that helped me.
Awesome. So I told you in a couple of our conversations, like I'm a diehard patriot. I never served our country, but I thank veterans all the time on the street. If I see a license plate in the parking lot, veteran plate, I leave a note, and the note usually says, "Thank you for serving in our country. You represent the best of us. Sincerely, a grateful citizen." And I leave it on the windshield. I do it every time, no matter what my time constraints are. And if the veterans want to talk to me, I'll listen to their stories. And I've met some interesting veterans. I met a man, he came in on Costco on a little scooter, he had a World War II hat on, and I made a beeline for him right away. And I said, what did you do in World War II? And he was a tail gunner on a dive bomber in the Battle of Midway. And I was like, holy cow. And we talked for like 20 minutes, and then his son and daughter-in-law came up to him. "Come on, Dad." I go, "I'm sorry, it's my fault." And they go, "No, it happens all the time." So, but the Vietnam veterans, the stories that they've told me, none of those stories are about being at Vietnam. They're all about when they came home. And they were spit on. One veteran told me he was actually an officer, and when he finally got home, he put his dress uniform on to go to a church that he went to his whole childhood, and some of the church members heckled him with the baby killer stuff. I met another Vietnam veteran in the gym. He had a hat on, and I just thanked him and stuff, and he just opened up to me right away. And he's like, "Yeah, me and my buddies, we still go to counseling." And, he goes, "We're still in the head, effed up in the head."
Yep.
And a lot of people don't realize that freedom is paid for continuously. If the soldier or Marine dies in combat, then the family carries on the burden of our freedom. And if you are lucky enough to come home whole, you carry all the scars. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but I make it a point to understand that. And I think the Vietnam veterans had it the worst when they came home. And where did this baby killer come from? Was that the My Lai? There was something, a My Lai massacre where a rogue group of guys actually, is that what happened?
Again, it's the news. They focus on the worst of everything. And of course, then the public assumes automatically, well, that's what's going on in Vietnam. And that's not what goes on in Vietnam, as you can see from my book. I mean, we're just a bunch of, young men who are trying to save liberty, the John Wayne thoughts of World War II, liberty and freedom, we're going to save these people. That's the thought that you go there with.
And you learn otherwise, don't you, when you're out there?
God, yes. I mean, when you're in Vietnam, you have this one thought, and I portray it in the book. You're naive. You're just trying to learn. You're trying to figure out how everything is working. And then halfway through Vietnam, you start saying to yourself, wait a second, I'm fighting here in this rice paddy, and all these farmers hate us. They want nothing to do with us. They don't help us. And they're South Vietnamese. And then I started asking myself, well, who are we fighting in Vietnam? We're fighting the North Vietnamese, and we're fighting the Viet Cong. Well, who are the Viet Cong? They're the South Vietnamese. So who are we fighting? I mean, we're there. We're trying to help these people, and as far as I'm concerned, they live in the Stone Age. They're living in grass huts still, and to this day, a lot of them still do. But it's a shame that it's a shame that it works that way. But
So there's a term, and I'm going somewhere with this, called Old Salty. So what is that?
Well, old salts are the people that have been there before us. So if you're an old salt, you're the new guy. You're the BNG, the brand new guy.
Or the
FNG.
Yeah. Because there was a passage in your book where you had a couple new guys and you seemed to be always nice to them, where other guys were very dismissive of them. And you asked them, and I'm paraphrasing, so why do you think you guys are here?
Right.
And they gave you the John Wayne World War II, I'm here to protect
liberty.
Yep.
Right.
And you, in that short amount of time, you had become, an old salt, and you knew better. And it was funny to me. It was curious to you to ask them, because you were them just a few months before.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And, I didn't want to treat them like I was treated, like a second-class citizen, like a guy who didn't know what he was doing. And of course, instead of helping and training, they were just going out and just surviving. And, they looked down on us. But I guess in a way, they wanted us to prove ourselves. And it got to be towards the end of my tour, I didn't want to know the names of anybody anymore. I didn't know that until after I came home, and years later, when I go to the reunions, these guys come up to me, and if they're in the beginning of my the beginning of my tour, it was like, oh, I know exactly who they are. I could tell you where they're from, everything, their accent. But as towards the end of my tour, it's like, I have no clue who these guys are. And that's because when you get into combat and a lot of guys are getting killed and wounded and you're carrying them off the field, you just don't want to get close anymore. And that's what was going on with me. I didn't want to get close to anybody, just stay close with the guys that you knew. And so but I still tried to keep helping the new guys, because you had to train them, you had to teach them. They're going to, they're just, even following me, they died and were wounded. It's scary, but that's just the way it was in Vietnam.
So in a combat situation, and this is what I got from the book, as you became an old salt and you had more experience, they'd often put you in the front, right? You lead them, right. Whatever. One of the absolute most interesting stories is you were the front guy, and you came across a cave, and to tell the story of what you found in the cave.
Well, it's one of the tunnels that you had to go in. And so they asked the whole platoon, it was a squad at the time. What I'll be talking about is about 9 or 10 guys. And they said, okay, which one of you guys are, they want us to kind of scope out the tunnel. And it was just tunnel enough so you could fit in with just a little room on the head and the shoulders. And everybody was going, not me, I'm too short. They were all saying, not me, I'm not going in. And I don't know what drove me to, I felt like I wanted to prove myself. And I said, I'll go in. And they gave me a 45 and a flashlight, and I started walking in. And I'm going, what the heck am I doing here? What is this? If all they have to do is shoot down the tunnel, they couldn't miss me. And if they see the light, they're going to know someone's coming in. And so, I'm looking all the way down the tunnel to see if I see a gun coming out or something like that. And I'm just watching and watching. I'm getting deeper and deeper into the tunnel. And I'm looking at the end of the tunnel. And then all of a sudden in my face, something was like a spider web or something in my face. And I jumped back and I put the flashlight on it, and I said, what? And here it was. The skin of a snake was hanging down there. They had hung a snake in there, and it had shed its skin and was able to get free. And I didn't know if it was further in the tunnel. I said, I got to get out of here fast. And that's what I did. I just backed out. And of course, hit somebody's face because they were looking in, trying to coax me in further. And I just came out of there like in a terror. So,
I don't know how scary that would be to go in a tunnel like that, because those tunnels are dug by the enemy. And so tell the audience, you were kind of part of a special unit, right?
So at the very height of the Vietnam War in 1967, the enemy was just putting in thousands and thousands of soldiers to combat us, especially in the DMZ area. And they were coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So what the Marines decided to do is create a new unit, the newest weapon to defeat the North Vietnamese. And that is a battalion of Marines that is on the ready at any particular time to be helicoptered immediately into the action. And that's exactly what happened. We were SLF Alpha, Special Landing Force Alpha. There's a lot of special landing forces that they had in Vietnam, but the Alpha was, we were on a float. And so we were on the USS Okinawa, and then later on we ended up on the USS Iwo Jima, which are helicopter ships. And of course, the Marines are a department of the Navy, and the Navy didn't give the Marines a lot of money back then. And so we had the old CH-34 bubble nose, they're like a grasshopper looking helicopter. And of course, the Army, they have more helicopters in the 101st Airborne and the newest and best than the entire Marine Corps. And that's just one unit of the Army. And we had terrible gear. We had Korean War Sea Rats and stuff like that. But we were the newest weapon. And one thing about, we never got a hot meal flown to us in the field. And we heard that the Army got, they every once in a while, they bring out hot meals to those guys. And you didn't expect anything. I mean, as a Marine, you just never expected to get any hot meals. I mean, that would have been a super treat. Not even on a holiday like Thanksgiving would we get a special meal coming out or anything. They just didn't have the ability to be able to do it. So yeah, we were the newest weapon. And so we were either a blocking force or we were an attack force, or we would go in, and if another unit was getting hit, we would go in and retrieve the bodies of our Marines, because we never left them behind. And we were in the DMZ quite a bit, and that's where they were sending thousands. I mean, a lot of Marines died, but we killed 10 to 1. They just kept on sending more and more and more. And, after a while, you just, you watch your leadership getting annihilated, and you say, what the heck's going on? And I think by the end of my tour, the leadership they were having problems finding leaders. They didn't have experienced men, and they were bringing in guys that were coming right out of their, officers that were coming out that were just brand new, coming out of officer training candidate school. And so we just didn't have the best leadership in the world. And every once in a while, a good one would pop in there, and then next thing you know, he's dead or wounded and gone. They would aim for him. And one thing I learned is that you don't do a lot of pointing, and you don't do a lot of, you keep your head low. And if you're given commands, you just can't be letting everybody know that you're in charge, because they aim for those guys. They aim for the radio men. They aim for the corpsmen. And
you touch upon evaluating leaders as they're rotating in throughout the book. Like some guys you really you felt good with. Like, I'm glad we have this guy. You had one sergeant. He was like a big bully, and you guys are looking at each other like, what? This guy, and he wound up in the brig because he had a fight with somebody.
Yeah, the lieutenant. Yeah, got in a fight with the lieutenant.
And you were relieved that he was rotated out, right?
I'm so happy. To this day, I'm happy. He was mean. He was so mean to everybody. He would threaten us constantly. He was a big guy. He was a big, strong guy. He was like a giant, like the Hulk type of guy. And he was mean.
So this is just my understanding of history, because, were they telling these officers body count? Like it was all about body count, go out and get some kills? Were they doing that?
No, what it was is if you ever had any action, you got third degreed about how many were wounded, how many, and you're in a firefight, you don't know how many are wounded and killed. So you have to start guessing how many. And the larger the number, the better you looked, so they did get inflated. And I'm sure we did kill enough people with bombings and artillery that would make up for that number.
Right. And that happened in a lot of battles where you guys would be pinned down and then, the fighters would come in and drop bombs. And, that must have been so relieving just to hear that. Or the artillery would be firing from somewhere behind you, right? And you call that in.
They'd go over your head. Sometimes we were close enough to the ocean where the ships would fire and you could actually see the rounds going over your head.
Wow.
I never thought I'd ever be able to see a round, but when they're firing and they're going overhead, you can actually see this black, darting across the sky.
Wow, that's crazy. We talk about the leaders and stuff like that, and you had some good ones and that got lost, and you also had a sergeant who was just a big bully, and you guys, you were like terrified that this guy would actually be leading you, and I think he wound up hitting an officer and wound up in the brig. Is that correct?
That's exactly what happened. And talk about being happy, because when someone's making your life miserable, you're already miserable. You're in the jungle. And he's yelling at you and screaming, and he's degrading you, and he's threatening he's going to beat the hell out of you. And,
wow.
It's like, where's this guy coming from? Something must have been going on in his head, because he was whacked out. And then when we got back aboard ship, and one guy, there was one guy that actually shot himself to get out of he was so terrified between getting killed by the enemy and being threatened by this guy, he just couldn't take it anymore. He shot himself in the leg. And he was talking to me. He said, what do you think? What do you think? I go, absolutely. Don't even think of that, stupid, And he did. And it's like, I was so relieved when that man, we didn't know where he was. He was like missing and gone for a while on the ship. It's like, where is he? I don't know. Haven't seen him. And then we find out that he's in the brig because he got in the fight with the lieutenant and actually hit him. And that's all we needed. He must have known, the lieutenant must have known. People he could see what was going on. The guy was just being mean. And who knows, he might have been flipped out himself.
I remember you saying in the book, like, you didn't know where he was coming from. Like, what's going through this guy's head? So he winds up in the brig, but you had another situation where you were told, lead the guys up some type of ravine, and it didn't look good to you.
Right.
So you asked to go do a little recon on your own, correct?
Correct. We were south of the DMZ, right on the ocean. There was a washout that was, there was like trees and weeds that you could walk in along the ocean, but there was a washout that from the west, that all the rain would wash out into this one area. And so there was nothing. There was nothing growing in that area. And so there was a distinct one side to the other side. And he wanted to cross it in the middle of the night in the dark. And I just said, this is really a bad thing. We can't just be walking out there in a line going across this washout. I got to check it out. It's just, this is not right. If there's none there, then fine, I'll go across. I said, but I don't want to get everybody killed walking across this ravine. And I insisted so many times. He says, okay, just go ahead and do it. So I did. I went across, and all I had was my M16. I left my cartridge belt, my pack, and everything back with them. And I slowly crossed very methodically across, and then got to the other side. There was a little hill to get up to the other side. And as soon as I got to the other side, I just listened. And they were there. There was several of them, and they were laughing and joking. And I'm going, oh my gosh, there's like 5 or 6 guys there right on the other side, right where we were going to go. And I said, I could throw a grenade. Oh, I didn't bring my cartridge belt. I had no grenades on me. All I had was my M16. I'm not going to attack like 5 guys. And by the way, they got to know that there's something over here. I got to get back and I got to tell them what's going on. So, I was like a lizard in the desert going fast. When I left, I mean, they weren't right there watching. They were talking to themselves. They weren't paying attention. And I knew I could get back real fast. So I just went back just on my, crawling fast as I could. And I got to the other side and I told them, I said, they're there. They're big. They're there big time. I mean, there's like 5 of them talking and laughing. And he didn't believe me. I mean, it's like the sergeant just would not believe me. No matter what I did, I said, you got to call in artillery. You got to call from the Quaviet River. You got to get those 105s over here and just blow the hell out of this area. And I don't know whether he didn't know how or was like shy about it or what was going on. So he ended up going back and talking to the lieutenant. And he said, okay, we're going to pull back a bit and then we're going to send in some, the 105s. I go, oh my gosh, they listened to me. I'm so happy. And 2 rounds, that's all, just 2 rounds. And it was so far over our heads and their heads, it wasn't going to hit anybody. It wasn't going to do anything. And then he told me, okay, I got to cross now. And I just insisted, I don't care. I'm not crossing. I'm not going to go. We'll die. He says, well, I'm telling you, we're going to cross. And I said, we're not going to cross here. They're right there. And it was like.
You swore at him too, didn't you?
Yeah. I was like, I'm not going. So then he said, okay, well, we'll go down. I made the suggestion. I said, why don't we go towards the ocean where it narrows a little bit towards the ocean. Why don't we just go down there and then cross over at the ocean? And, he said, all right, let's get it done. And so I took I walked down and, got over towards the ocean to cross. And it was so late at night and there was a big mist coming in off the ocean. It was just it was like 100% humidity mist coming across. It made you actually wet. And so that's exactly what we did. And we didn't know it, but they were over there big time and we were crossing real close to them. But because I was so quiet and so slow, I mean, I knew they're there. I knew they're there. So where are they? I don't know. And there was a few spots that I thought that they were, and I was pointing the M16. But eventually that turned out exactly what I said. That's how the big firefight started. It was an all-day firefight.
And I think you said in there that the Marines that were with you, that everybody was like, they were moving as quietly as ever. Like they knew how serious it was. And like you guys were like slithering in. Was that the battle where you were at a crossroad, like you didn't want to go, and then the guy said, well, then you can go back to base and we're going to do what we got to do to you and I'll lead them. And you thought to yourself, no, I'm not, then they'll all get killed. Right.
So what had happened is we ended up walking further north, right along the ocean, still inland a little, and, just kind of following a path, and we're walking along. And then we finally came to like a big dune in front of me, and I either had to go right or left. I looked down on the ground, being the first man in the patrol. I looked down on the ground, and there was, when you have moisture on sand, it's dark sand. But I remember when my last year of high school, I was going to Rainbow Beach in Chicago, and I used to work at the Chicago Tribune and got off at 4 a.m. And I would go down to the beach and walk the beach. And I remember as I would walk down on Rainbow Beach, the sand was all full of moisture. And as I walked, each footstep was a bright white from the dry sand underneath. Well, here, the same exact thing, except it wasn't a footstep. It was a path that was about 4 feet wide. And that meant that more than one person was walking down that path. And I said, we can't go down there. They're down there. Look at the ground, look at the sand. And he just couldn't see the sand. He didn't know what I was talking about. And he finally said to me, he says, either you're going to walk that or I'm going to put you in cowardice in face of the enemy, and I'm going to put somebody else up here to walk there. And I thought to myself, nobody could walk it but me. I just, if someone else, they don't know what to do. I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly. I had my M16 on full automatic. That's the name of the book. And on full automatic, and I'm just ready. I'm ready because I know they're here. And sure enough, I went face to face with two of them in a hole. And that's what started the whole big battle that day, was me opening up on the two guys in the hole and then yelling ambush right. And then, all hell broke loose.
Is that the battle in the book that you drew the diagram of the layout of the battlefield?
Yes.
Yeah, that was very interesting. And then many clusterfucks ensued after that. We had an episode with two tanks came in, right?
Right.
And the commander stuck his head out of the tank, right, to grab the 50 caliber.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I know exactly what he said because I heard it from the guys back then. I talk about how this tank commander had popped up his head up. And he told the guys in the tank, he was the tank commander and he was the commander of the two tanks. And he said, I know what Patton would do. And he said, this is what Patton would do. And he got out of it to get on the 50 caliber. And the reason he did that is because in a tank, you just can't see these guys hiding in their spider holes everywhere. They're all everywhere. And they just couldn't see them. And he figured if he had a high view, he could just annihilate them. And he was right. But, someone shot him right in the head and he fell right back down in the tank. And then the two tanks, that was it. They left. One of the tank commander was gone. I don't think they knew what the heck to do. They wanted to go back and save his life. But here you've got a whole company of Marines in the middle of this battle, and they're retreating out. And it was like, what the heck? But the only reason, when I wrote the book, I'm stuck in a hole with my M16 jammed, and the rounds were going over my head, and I wrote in the initial manuscript that I went from the rounds going over my head, and then I would talk about how they landed and what happened to those guys. And my editor told me, she said, if you make a statement like that, you got to say how you know that. They're going to think you're lying because if you're in this hole, how do you know what's going on where those rounds are hitting? And so then that's when I came up to put in the book. I was to find out years later, or I was to find out after the battle that this is what happened. Mm-hmm. And then I would just talk about what happened. And so what's interesting is once I wrote the book, I'm reading all the reviews, and here one of the tank commanders, the other tank commander in the other tank, wrote a review in Amazon. And he said, I know exactly what this guy is saying because it happened exactly like he said. I was in the other tank when it happened.
Wow.
And that's on the review. The reviews are through the roof. I have two bad reviews, and they are, one of them talks about, I have all kinds of racist tropes.
Oh my Lord.
And actually I say in the beginning of the book, I wanted to keep this like we actually talked, how we said. We called the enemy gooks at the time, and that's what I used. And, and I apologize for using the word, but I said it's important to keep the narrative of exactly the way it happened. And of course, then this guy, he brags about his service and people didn't spit on him when he came home. So he really put down my book. But other than those two reviews, all the reviews are through the roof, and they come from people all over the world. And that's what's really exciting to see. People in Australia and England, all of the United Kingdom countries, and France, and I can't even tell you the countries that go on and on and on that people are reading this book, and it's so exciting because I never thought I just want to get the story out. I didn't think it was going to be award-winning, let alone #1 bestseller 62 weeks in a row on Amazon.
Awesome.
Yeah,
you had mentioned Rifle Jam, and this is just based on my knowing of history. The M16 came into use right then during the Vietnam War, correct?
We were the first Marine unit to get the M16 rifle.
And that was going off of the M14, right? Which was a pretty good rifle. Is that correct?
We had the M14, which was just like the AK-47. It's very, you could throw it in the mud, pick it up, and shoot it.
And that shot a bigger cartridge, right? The
Yeah,
was it a 30-06 or a
7.62?
Okay, so that's my understanding. And then the AR-15 is a civilian, but the M16 shot a smaller cartridge.
22.
And
a 22 long.
So you could carry a lot more ammo, but were they having jamming problems? Was that a real thing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've had some people say, oh, that wasn't true, but that is true. It's flat out 100% true. When you get in a combat situation, I carried at least 20 magazines on me. You fire 10, and that thing has a real good possibility of jamming just by the carbon that was built up. It was a high carbon shell powder that they used. And on top of that, the chamber that the round would go into was made of a different alloy, and it caused swelling and jamming of the M16. And the lip on the on that 22 caliber, it has a very small lip. So when the ejector would pull that out, it would just rip a hole right there, right at that spot. And no matter how many times you cleared the chamber and put it in a new round, it would jam every single time.
And I remember you were in that last fight, and you fired a round and jam, and you took the gun apart and cleaned it, and did it again, and you basically just had one round in the chamber and knew that that's all you had. And when you put your bayonet on, and you got your K-bar, and you hope for the best.
Exactly. Right? They were all around us. I mean, I can hear them talking and everything. You're sitting there with your jammed rifle, and I just put a round, and I said, I don't want to give away my position. I didn't want to, expose myself. So if they came, they would be firing full automatic at me, and I have one round. And if there was more than one of them, I'm going to be dead. I had my K-bar, I had my bayonet on, and I had hand grenades that I was going to use. And I straightened out the cotter pins so I could pull the cotter pin out real easy, and just sat there and just kind of waited. And it was definitely scary. You have no idea the terror that's in your mind that, only God could save you during this time. It's like, but, I didn't expose myself, so I didn't, it's just like I was hidden.
I think you had contemplated whether to take a look, right? To see the surroundings and stuff. And you're like, no, I don't want to get my head blown off.
I didn't want to stick my head up at all. Not at all, because that would give away my position.
So while we're on the rifle subject, there was a part in the book where you had gone on a mission and you had just come back, and they said you got to go on another mission like the next day, and your ammo and stuff was rusty, and you wanted new ammo. You went on your own mission on the ship, right?
Right.
Tell us about that
one.
Oh,
that's and I didn't think that would be a big hit in the book, but a lot of people talk about that. It's an actual true story. It's like we came in off this operation, and we had to turn in. You always had to turn in your ammunition. You couldn't hold on to it. And so some of it got green, the green on the ammunition. Then
that's the copper oxidizing,
right? Oxidizing, right. And so I always cleaned mine. Mine were perfect, but we all had to throw them in the same box. So when they told us we had to go back out, 1st Battalion, 9th Marines had a Bravo company, I believe, that was completely wiped out. There was only a few of them left, and the bodies were out there, and we had to go back into the DMZ and help get the bodies out with these other battalions that were coming in. And so, we didn't even have clean clothes. We had to go back out in the same clothes we had come in from a month and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I did. So then the day before, they gave us the ammunition, and they gave me, it was all the garbage that these other guys had not cleaned their weapons. And I was going to have to sit there all night, because I took a lot of ammo. I took a lot of them. I took a lot with me. I remember, and I hate to diverse from this, but I remember in the beginning, I was trying to figure out, do I take more food or do I take more ammo? And I always wondered, gee, which, and I kind of did a 50-50. And after you go into combat, you don't ever want to run out of ammo. So that for me, I wanted to carry a lot of ammo. And they had just had these crates of ammo and stuff that were already on the hangar deck, but they didn't get a chance to open them or anything. And I was questioning our leadership. I said, why can't we get that ammo? We're going out. And they said, well, you got to use this ammo. And I'm going, dang it, clean it, get out of here. You're just a peon back then. And so, I wrote all my letters that I was writing home, because you never know if this is your last letter going out. So I wrote like 13 letters, and I was the last one to get back in bed, and I was down in the deeps of the ship, and everything was dark. All the lights were shut off and everything. And I thought, wait a second, that ammo was up above. Maybe I could go get some of that ammo. And so I did my own little midnight thing. I went out and I climbed up the stairs from the bottom of the ship. And then when I got to the hangar deck, it was just dark everywhere, except there was little lights, just little, night lights to get people through. And I'm going, I'll just go into the shadows. And sure enough, I went there. There was it was like a whole plethora of food and ammo and stuff like that. And that's what I did. I just did this incredible thing. And then all of a sudden I heard something, and it was the guy that was supposed to be guarding everything. And oh my God. Well, you have to get the end of that story, but it's really a good story.
Yeah, and you got your ammo.
I got my ammo, let's say that. and extra stuff too.
You had mentioned quite a bit about the bravery of the helicopter pilots. Tell me a little bit about that.
Incredible. Because, at least when we're on the ground, we're able to, get behind items. You could hide in a hole. You could hide by a tree. You could hide by a rice paddy dike. And that would be good because, you at least you got cover. These guys would come in and they were shooting at the helicopter. When we landed, we were helicopter assault, and you'd be landing and you'd hear like someone throwing rocks at the helicopter. It's just like someone throwing rocks. It would hit like a rock, but they were bullets going through the fuselage.
Wow.
And these guys would land and they would get drop off our supplies, and we put in our wounded and dead, and they would take off. And some of them had so many holes in them when they got back to the ship. It's like almost watching We Were Soldiers.
Yeah, that's brutal.
And when that helicopter comes in and it's getting hit, and that's what was happening with us. And those helicopter pilots, we had our own helicopter squadron that was with us, and they had the evil eye. They called them evil eyes on them. And so there was eyes on the front of the helicopter, and those guys were incredible. They were just flat out incredible. One thing is, once they're out, they're out. But with us, you're still in and you're still getting shot at. But just to it's like exposing yourself to danger.
Yeah. So one of the stories that I've told to many people, because I've been talking about you a lot in the book, that every time I tell the story, people cry. And every time I tell the story, I cry. And it's the story about the baby, which do a little briefing on the baby.
That's the one story that still resonates inside me. It's an incredible story. I had no idea what I was going to be in for. It's just one of those, we're going to be doing a sweeping exercise, and we're looking for search and destroy. And I was really alert at this time. This is when I was getting into my peak about being aware. Hypervigilant is what I would use the word, hypervigilant. And we had to cross this ravine, and in the ravine there was reeds, and the reeds only came to the top of the ravine. So it was a deep, and it was like 10 feet wide. So it wasn't that wide, but that's where the water would flow during the monsoon season. It had a big rut in the land, and so as we were crossing that, I just felt uncomfortable that there was something amiss in this thing. And I thought, this is really dangerous. For me, I'm thinking, as we're walking away, they could pop out of this ravine and just start shooting at us. The reeds were so heavy inside there that they could have easily hid inside there as we walked through. And I decided to search it a little bit, and I found a little tunnel, and I heard something coming out of the tunnel, and I was like, "Oh my God, they're in there. They're," I'm all of a sudden everybody's saying, "Come on, Taylor, come on," and I'm going, "Oh boy." I said, "There's something down here," and so next thing you know, they're all pointing their M16s down into the hole, and they're saying, "Just throw a hand grenade in it. Just throw a grenade in there. Just the hell with it," And I'm going, I don't know. It's if it was the enemy, they wouldn't be making noise. This is noise. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. There's something there. And as I went in to the hole, I discovered that what was making noise is something that was wrapped up in a blanket. And what I ended up doing was pulling out a baby, and the baby was in there wrapped up in a blanket. And the baby must have been left there for a while because it was like crying and scared and put in a hole. You know what I mean? And so, now everybody's getting mad because when we started off, we were supposed to meet certain objectives at certain times, and we didn't even leave. They were late leaving the first, when we first landed, they were trying to get everybody together and online, and then we were about an hour less time, and we had to get moving, and we had to go through this area a certain amount of time, had to cover it. So they're pushing us like cattle, you know what I mean? And here I'm putting a big clog in this whole system. And so the next thing you know, the sergeant's over, he's yelling at me, and I'm showing him the baby. And the next thing you know, the lieutenant comes over and he's yelling at me. I'm going, what am I going to do? And they told me that I had to take the baby with, just get in line, carry the baby. And I'm going, why don't we just leave the baby here? I mean, someone's going to come for this baby. And they said, the lieutenant had walked away, and the sergeant told me, he says, look, they gave you an order. You don't want to disobey an order if they say, where's the baby? And they don't have it. I go, but it doesn't make sense to take the baby. It doesn't make sense. And they go, bring the baby, Taylor. So next thing you know, I climbed out of the hole with the baby, and well, that's the beginning of a story with this baby. It's incredible.
Yep.
It's an incredible story. And then after 2 days, I had to give up the baby. And it was the only thing. It brought home. It brought sanity to me. It brought, being alive and helping. It did all the things for me I needed. And then it was like they ripped it out of my arms, and next thing you know, it's flying away in a helicopter, and it just broke my heart.
Yeah.
So never found out what happened to the baby, because back then, first of all, I had PTSD. I couldn't take care of myself practically,
right.
Let alone a baby. And then when I did, there was they had the privacy issues. They didn't have computers, didn't have any way to research it really.
Right.
So I'm hoping that maybe the book, someone might say, you know what? I know what happened to that baby or something. And as a matter of fact, the baby's over here, and then we meet, and that would be my new book.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I wanted to ask you, when you become an old salt, you've been through a lot of combat, and you're so many stressful situations, just walking, and trying to be alert and listening and having adrenaline dumps all the time. Does your fear, what you would constitute as fear inside you, does it evolve? Does it change from the beginning when you don't know what to expect to, like when you're in that final battle, or is the fear more amplified because you're almost out of combat because you've served your 13 months? Does your fear amplify? Is there any kind of evolution either direction with the fear?
I can tell you exactly what that is. I remember the fear is the same from the beginning to the end, but the fear becomes more eminent to me when the closer you get, because what you notice is nobody seems to be making the 13 months. Nobody seems to. You're either getting wounded, you're getting killed. And it always happened. It's unbelievable how many times in the 12th and 13th month that these guys have been there all this time, and then they get killed or they're wounded, badly wounded. And as you go through your tour, I remember you get more anxiety over the issue. Is this the last battle? Is this the last battle? And then you go into another battle. And is this the last battle? And you start talking about how much of a short timer you are.
Short timer means you're almost out.
You're almost out, right? You serve 13 months in the Marines, 12 in all the other services. And that 13th month seemed to be the big killer for us. The one that people just never seem to make. It's pretty horrific when you have a battalion of Marines, and that's like 1,250 of combat soldiers, not counting all of the support groups that are connected with it. But and they're broke up into 4 companies of infantry, 1 company of weapons. And then you just see people, they're getting killed and new people coming in, and those are getting killed, and new guys here are getting killed, and they're getting wounded. And all of a sudden 1 or 2 of them come back, and here they were shot in the arm and they're back already after a month and a half. It's like, what are you doing back here? And it's just like, that's how I ended up getting 3 Purple Hearts. At the one reunion, they at the big dinner, they said, all those that served in Vietnam, raise your hand. And they said, so, and all of those that got 1 Purple Heart, raise your hand. And, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many of them because, we were in combat. There's so many guys. Those with 2 Purple Hearts, raise your hand. And just a few of them came down. Those with 3 Purple Hearts, and there still was a lot of us that had 3 Purple Hearts. And that's one thing about the Marines. If you have 3 Purple Hearts or you have 2 48-hour wounds, they can't send you back to a combat zone for 2 years. So that's what saved my life. I didn't want to go back to Vietnam. Once I realized that that war was stupid. It was crazy. We weren't going to win that war. You could just feel it. I mean, we were winning all the battles, sure, but they had the determination, and we didn't have like lines like in World War II. All right, well, let's take France. So they took France. All right, let's take Belgium. And they took Belgium. So they were able to take these countries one at a time and then say, okay, that's ours. And in Vietnam, it was just like the Middle East. You don't know who the enemy is. You could take a hill and you turn right around and give it right back. And they're right back there the next day. So, it's like, what the heck's going on here?
I mean, I don't know the numbers, but it seems like statistically you were grossly outnumbered.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like you had a finite amount of troops, and like you said, they just keep pouring in, and you could have a 10-to-1 kill ratio, and they keep coming.
In the Marines, it's not like an army. The Army was our United States Army. It's huge, just huge. The Marines, they're good, for the combat and hard combat. But when you go years and years of combat, these leaders are getting wounded and killed. And in my outfit, they were killed mostly. And that means you've lost a real valuable tool. And then what they put in place is sometimes inept people who really didn't know what they were doing, that were just guessing. So that last battle I was talking about where I was stuck in the hole, both the sergeant and the lieutenant were relieved of duty because of their ineptness and what happened.
Didn't one of those 2 wind up back at the base during the battle?
Yeah, he came back, and I know the guy's name, Ed Niederberger. He went and he was so upset, and I didn't know what was going on. The Amtrak came in off the ocean and was picking up the wounded and stuff, and he comes walking off. So what had happened was he had run when the ambush was set off by me. He apparently ran all the way back to the base at C4 through where the washout was and everywhere. And he ended up back in the base all by himself.
He left the battle.
He left the battle and left us all out there. And the lieutenant, he was relieved. Now, they wanted to charge him with cowardice in the face of the enemy, both of them. And of course, the Marine Corps didn't want that on their record. And so they just put him somewhere else. And we heard that when we got that sergeant, that he was relieved from another unit and he came to us like to make himself better or something. I don't know. And he gave the appearance he knew what he was doing. He could give commands and everything. But when he got down into the dirty of the battle, he just folded like nothing. He just folded like he was a sixth grader, didn't know what to do.
I know we all like to think that we would be brave in certain scenarios, but we don't know.
No.
We don't know what would happen.
No.
I
can tell you one thing for sure. There were sometimes I probably should have won like a Congressional Medal of Honor because of this something I would do that would be spectacular. And another time I could have been cowardice in the face of the enemy because I was terrified and frozen. You just never know at the moment of time when you're in so many different battles and you're so many situations and your mind is like just you finally get to the point in your tour. All I want to do is go home. I want to get out of here. This is crazy. I don't understand it. And of course, you do come home, but you don't come home the same. And that's what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan and all the Middle East is just a crazy place. Did you know that right now, 22 Gulf War vets commit suicide every single day?
Well, I didn't know what the number was, but I knew it was high. What can a common man do for these people, for you guys? I mean, I think veterans and stuff, does that meaningful? Does that make a difference? What can we do?
We've evolved. The government has evolved. They seem to be doing a better job now after all these years. When we first came home, it was horrible. Ivan Heisted was shot in the hip, and he came home, and he had a horrible time with the VA. They didn't change his bandages. They didn't tend him very well, and he was over in Lakeside or one of those Chicago hospitals, and he was treated very poorly. And when I've been trying to get the VA benefits in the old days, it would be impossible practically. You'd wait 2 years before they'd come up with some kind of determination, and you'd have paperwork a mile high, and all these papers, they kept on like messing with you. And that's what it was like back then. Now they have the PAC Act, and people should be taking advantage of that. If they've been rejected, they should be going to the PAC Act. So when someone says to Bill Taylor, "Thank you for your service," it means so much to me because of the way we came home. And when someone does acknowledge me, I have to take the time and say thank you and to tell them it means a lot to me, because it really does to especially Vietnam veterans. And I'm sure the World War II veterans feel the same way. Our poor Korean veterans are the ones that are kind of, they went through hell and had no acknowledgement whatsoever. And now at least the Vietnam veterans are getting acknowledgement. And it started around when the Chicago parade started. That's when I noticed the shift inside me. Is when I finally got acknowledged, was at that parade. And that's when things started happening better for me, and acknowledging that, and I didn't realize until I wrote the book, my service to this country. And I always felt bad about this, the whole thing. I really didn't do anything. My mind was like, you're just a combat soldier. There was nothing. And, but I want to talk about it, and it finally, especially writing the book, it's like the discovery of what I went through and how I made it through it. And I just had to tell the story.
Just on the Korean War thing, I saw a Korean War veteran outside of the grocery store, and I ran up to him and did my normal, thank you for your service, whatever. And he said to me, "Did you know what they call the Korean War? The Forgotten War?" And I go, "Yes, sir, I'm aware of that." And I told him that my name is Frank, and I was named after my uncle, and he died in Korea at age 19. And he was originally in the band. he was the youngest member of the Army band, and two of his buddies got killed. And he said, put me on the front line. And he wrote a letter home about that. He said, my two buddies got killed. Forget about a discharge. I'm staying here until it's over. These people are worse than the Japs, is what he put in the letter. Yeah. And that letter got home after he passed away. And he did get a Purple Heart because he died in the hospital. But I was telling this Korean War veteran that I am named after my Uncle Frank. So believe me, I would never forget about the Korean War, and that made him feel good. But yeah, you're right about that. So tell me about your faith now and what it was then and what role it played then.
You know, faith is really important to me, and it always has been. I'm 95% certain there's a God, 95. That 5% was, I don't know, maybe there's not, but I wish I had some proof. I wish I had an actual, something tangible. I wish God would talk to me, or I wish there was something physical that I would be able to realize, get the 100%. And I got my 100% in Vietnam. And how I got it was when I was getting mortared, and we had to sweep up to the DMZ every third day. Every platoon had to sweep up, and every day they got mortared at the same spot. And every third day was my day to go, and I would go to the same hole. I would jump in the same hole while you could hear the mortars going bloop, 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 getting ready to take off, and you know they're going to be landing pretty soon because you heard the sound before those rounds hit. And then I remember I dove into the hole, and I remember them walking them in on us. And they adjusted their fire, and it slowly came closer and closer, just like a thunderstorm. You know, you don't know if you're going to get hit with a bolt of lightning type thing. And I remember hearing the bloop go off and seeing the round, and I saw it land on me, right on my head, blowing me to a million pieces in my head. I seen it happening. And I remember screaming in the hole, screaming like a madman, dear God, help, save me, please save me. I don't want to die. I remember saying it, screaming it. I don't want to die. Dear Lord, I love you. Please don't. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And I thought to myself, at the moment of what I thought was my imminent death, who did I turn to? Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to die, and I turned to God. That was my 5%. You have to experience it. And I think people experience it with cancer. If they've survived cancer and they realize how precious life is. And so the war did a good thing for me. It made me realize that every day is a very special day, and that every day is a gift, and you have to treat it like a gift. And you can't take it like you're in the Matrix. You're not living real. You're just going day after day, and you're just living and going day after day, and then suddenly you die. No, you need to precious every day. You need to make sure, and I totally believe in God. Say my prayers every night, and I say it because I know someday I'll meet my Maker, and I reflect on everything that I've done in the day, and I say to myself, geez, I would have let that moment pass, but I get to relive that moment of that day that was so great. Maybe sitting on a swing, just swinging, and how wonderful it felt. So if you just pass those moments up, it's just passing moments.
My belief is God has a purpose for us all, and maybe the book is your purpose. Maybe I'm sure you thought about that already.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You always wonder, why me? Why did he save me? It's a guilt feeling that why me? And now that the book is written and healing people, healing veterans, healing families, it's even healed protesters. I had 2 protesters contact me. One apologized after reading my book, apologized and said he was sorry. And the other was a lady, and she said, please ask for forgiveness. Wow. It's so powerful. You can't even believe. And to get these emails from, I show where people can contact me if they want to contact me. I get stories of a brother of a veteran He said his brother came home from Vietnam. What happened was he got overrun, and the enemy had stabbed him in the belly with a bayonet, and he managed to kill the guy and get him off. And he was medevaced out, and he came home, and he healed from his wounds and became an alcoholic. And his brother tried to help him and tried to get him straight and ask him to talk about what happened. He would never talk about what happened. And he said he would always ask him, I would always ask my brother, please, why don't you just tell me what happened? And he'd say, you don't want to know. I just don't want to talk about it. And his brother had died 2 years ago, is what he wrote. And that he thought that was going to be an empty place forever in his heart. And then he read my book about me being overrun. And he said, after reading your book and that part about being overrun, now I totally understand why my brother can't talk about it and why he could never talk about it. And he said, I will forever be thankful because now I feel like I understand now. And so to get a letter like that from somebody, and then another family member was a daughter of a veteran. And the daughter said that that when his dad came home, he became an alcoholic, and his wife, her mother, had divorced him, and so he moved off into the hills of Alabama, and she'd been trying to have a relationship with him all along, and could never get a relationship. He would never talk about the war, and then he read my book, and he called her after he read the book, and he said, "Would you take me for jeans?" And she said, I said, sure, I will. And I took him, and he started talking about the war. And she said, it took your book and 50 years to finally get a relationship with my dad that I never had before. When I hear these stories, and there's a lot more stories, but those are touching ones for me, that people are saying that they're being healed, and the veterans are being healed, and that families are being healed. And that makes a difference to me. And I hear people just rave about the book and how much they appreciate. They never knew what we went through, that type of thing. I didn't think it was anything like that. Those are the things that I get.
So you had mentioned people can have epiphanies when they have cancer and stuff, near-death experience. I have a theory that, you live and learn. We don't all live and learn, and most of us don't live and learn. And if you do live and learn, you're fortunate. Most people need that life-altering experience to actually understand this precious gift of life we have. I try to pay attention when I read your book. I try to imagine myself in those situations to the point where I'm actually horrified, like I'm trying to place myself in your shoes. And all I can do is imagine, and in imagining it, you're only scraping the surface of what you went through. But I know enough from paying attention and living and learning that I don't need to get diagnosed with cancer or be in a foxhole with mortar rounds exploding around me for me to have gratitude and appreciation. And I'll just share a Marine's story with you real quick. I was on a fishing trip, flying in Canada, and we were on the airplane, and I had a bunch of buddies with me, and a lot of them brought their fathers. And this is when I was in my 30s. Well, one of the fathers was a World War II Marine, and he had 3 amphibious landings. The last one was Iwo Jima, and he was in the third wave, which is when all hell broke loose. And 2 of the landing craft that he on either side of him got hit by artillery, and he watched his buddies basically vaporize. And when he got to the shoreline, under heavy fire, he said, the first thing I saw was a Marine bobbing in the water with his legs blown off, looking at me to help him. And he said, I didn't have time to help him. He didn't realize that he was already dead, and everything went downhill from there. This is an 80-year-old man telling me about a day in life when he was 19. So I got the chills when he told me the story. And then he went on to tell me, he says, you're friends with my son, and he was a great basketball player. And I used to try to make every game, and one game I missed. And when he got home, I said, son, how'd you play? And he said, Dad, I had a bad day. And this is what the Marine told his son. He said, son, your basketball team is about the size of a Marine squad. So imagine if at the end of the game, you not only lost the game, but everybody except you and one other guy was blown apart on the floor. He goes, that's a bad day, and you'll never know what a bad day is. And when I heard that story, I'm like, that's it. That just set the standard for bad day for me. And I have 3 sons, and when they would say that growing up, I would correct them and I would tell them the story. So they never said it in front of me again. Like, I don't say I'm having a bad day, I had a bad day ever. I make other things up. I'll say, well, today had some challenges, or, today took a little more effort, but I would never say that. And that's what your experience has done for me. So it has, helped me. And we talked about this before, but our freedom is fading. And I don't know what we can do as civilians, but I think if we stay planted in knowing where our history is and the American spirit, how we got here, and try and hold on to that, we have a chance. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I watched the country go into this crazy situation that we're in. And all I can say is that I believe that I believe in America, and I believe that the truth will come out. I do think the truth will prevail. I think we'll get it all straightened, we'll square it away. It's not going to be easy, just like some of the other things we've gone through, the Depression and, World War II, World War I. Even when you go back to the Revolutionary War, I mean, we go through an evolution. And we're now in an evolution of, we've been so free for so long that people don't know what I've been through. They don't know what it takes to be free. And they take it so much for granted. And they won't know until they have to go through the hard time. And I think this is the hard time that people are going to be experiencing, that it's going to wake people up. And I'm starting to see things turn around already. And I do believe in America, and I do believe in freedom. And eventually, these people that have been given everything, have been spoon-fed, that they don't understand freedom. They just take it for granted that everybody should have, and everybody's feelings are very important. And it's very self-serving when people say that to me. It's like, my feelings are hurt. Well, then start getting some gonads and start doing what you need to do to get away from that. The humor in the old days, Archie Bunker, you could laugh at how absurd his thinking was. You couldn't even show an Archie Bunker today. They don't even want to show it on TV. It's going to hurt somebody's feelings. Well, that's what the whole thing is about, is to understand there are people like Archie and Fred Sanford in the world. There are these people, and we can't hide it from you, and we can't take down our statues that we've built. I don't care if they're Civil War from the
Confederates.
The Confederates.
Yeah.
It's if you don't like that statue, then put one next to it that resembles what you want this to be. Rosa Parks maybe right next to it. This is what we've evolved to, but you can't take away our history. You can't take it away. And that's what people are trying to do. So
I agree.
We got to resurrect this feeling back, and it'll come. It'll eventually come. Unfortunately, it's like the Depression. It didn't happen overnight. It just went on for years and years and years. And we're seeing that. I'm seeing on the Instagram that people are showing they bought 45 items and it was $57. And now it's $250, the same exact 45 items. And it's like, that's inflation. Okay, well, we're getting to a point where now people are starting to, money isn't buying as much as it used to because of inflation, and it's a spending and being responsible for the spending. And some of the spending they're doing it makes me sick to my stomach. They're throwing money. It's just like they just don't care.
I'm glad you're hopeful. I go back and forth with hopeful and not hopeful. I see two things, the yin and yang of it is the bad guys, who's ever in control, the media's gone completely derailed. It's a propaganda. it's very hard to know what the truth is. But then I look at the statistics showing that, the majority of the American people don't believe the media. 78% of Americans have lost faith in their government. So we are in some type of great awakening. I don't know if it's going to be a civil war type situation, but the people are waking up, and that is what's going to be required. Like the Revolutionary War, they said only 5%, I think it was just 5% of the citizens was all it took to overthrow the most powerful army and navy in the world. You know, so
that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. And we have such a strong bandwidth demographically of patriots. And I don't know where the age starts. It might be, people in their late 30s and on that are still have that patriotic spirit, because we were taught to embrace our history, and not perfect by any means. Our history is not perfect at all, but the American spirit is awesome. And like I tell all the veterans, and I'm going to tell you, you do represent the best of us. I saw an interview, and a guy wrote a book, and he's like, what is your price? Is it 10 million? Is it 20 million? Is it 100 million? Because if your price isn't your life, then you're for sale. And everybody in the crowd was like, oh, and he repeated it. If your price isn't your life, then you're for sale. And when you pursue the truth, your price has to be your life. Otherwise, you can't pursue the truth. You will fall prey to somebody who has your number dialed in. That's right. And when you go into combat, your price is your life. And that is what we pay. That is what you paid for our freedom. So I won't forget you, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
Anything else you would like to add?
I've been thinking about what happened to me recently. I was a keynote speaker at the Crown Point Parade, and there was a lot of people at the end of the parade, and the mayor was there, and he gave his speech and he talked, and then we had the dignitaries. They all came and they pulled their speeches out, and I had spent some time writing something to say, because I was the keynote speaker. I want to say something that would be impactful to everybody, and so they all got through and they walked off the stage, and I wasn't impressed. It was just reading a piece of paper. And I got up there and I pulled out my paper and I looked at everybody and I said, I'm not going to read this. I'm not going to read this. This is Memorial Day. And I'm going to talk about the guys that died in my outfit. And I started talking about it. And I started with the first operation, which is Beaver Cage, and the guys that died during Beaver Cage. And the first guy to die was David Hart, and he was shot right in the heart. And I remember that, and I remember talking about it at this particular event. And then I started talking about all the operations, all the guys that were dead, and the guys that affected me most. And I only had like 10 minutes to talk, and I wanted to go on and on, but I felt like I was beyond the 10 minutes, and I did a little bit more, and then I ended it. And, I said, there's something else that I want to talk about. I said, there are heroes that we're not even mentioning here. And I said, the heroes are those guys that fought for this country, that came back from battle, from all these foreign wars, to come home and to have so much PTSD and then to commit suicide. I said, we have 22 guys a day that are doing it because something happens and that PTSD kicks in and they feel no hope. They feel like they can't go on, and they just end it. The pain is so great, they end it. And I said, we need to also remember these on Memorial Day, these heroes that fought for us and that are not with us today because, they came back with the scars. And, then I said, God bless America and everything. Well, I got a standing ovation. And so at the end of it, people were coming up to me and thanking me and stuff. And this one lady was just waiting. She's just waited at the end. And I'm just, saying thank you to this one and that one. And finally, this lady was the last one, and she came over and gave me a big hug. And she said, My son was one of the 22. That really touched my heart. And she thanked me. And it's very important to me that people understand and that she got it. And I was able to, touch her heart,
That's
acknowledge
amazing.
it. So
That's amazing.
yeah, I'm sorry for that, but
No, you got me with that one too. So, wow. Well, I hope everybody who watches this has a little better understanding. I know it's going to be helpful to some veterans. One of my dear family friends, he was a medic in Vietnam, and he's told me some stories like yours. Many people died in his arms, his buddies. And he said on Memorial Day, he goes, I got to go in my room for a couple hours and I just cry.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to talk about it, but maybe he will. No.
That was the first thing I said in my speech, too. As a matter of fact, I got a confession to make. I'm going to tell everybody here right now. This is my confession. My confession is this is the first Memorial Day I've come out of my basement.
Wow. That's cool.
So I just want to say before closing that on my website, onfullautomatic.com, I have 1,000 combat photos of all the guys I've served with, the ships that I was on, and anybody who's interested can go there. They can look. I've made them available so anybody who wants to take a picture and say, this for any reason, I leave it to the public. I've given it all away. I don't care. I think it's important that that this stays, so people understand it. And there's also a place if someone wants to contact me, they can contact me. It's on WordPress. It comes to me automatically in an email. So if there's anybody who would like to say something, or I'm always available for just about anybody. I just love my service now, and I love talking about it. And I will do whatever it takes to make. By the way, I wrote a screenplay with a friend of mine, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it because I had to take pieces of this battle and this battle, that battle, and put it in, because every page on a screenplay is a minute in a movie. And you can't tell the story in knowing that every page is a minute. You're only going to have, if you're going to be a 2-hour movie that's 120 pages of a screenplay, there's no way you can tell the story. So now we're in the process. We did the outline of a 4-part miniseries. And so that I'm working with a friend of mine to do this miniseries. And there's a guy that I am talking to with Apple TV. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but he does miniseries and he does movies. So I'm hoping that if, this is God driven in my eyes. This whole thing is like a miracle to come out and sell like 30,000 books, and I had a new daily record of 130 audiobooks were sold last month. And totally, there's on Kindle where you read it by page, and you have to pay it by page. 5 million pages have been read.
Wow,
and
that's
that is
fantastic.
Such a great feeling to know that the story is getting out. So,
yeah, my book is, I didn't write it to sell, but it's on Amazon. And it's called How to Be a Warrior of Light in a Dark World, A Patriot's Guide to Optimal Living. And I have a whole chapter on veterans and the importance of thanking veterans and what our freedom, how it's been paid for. So
that's awesome. I'm looking forward to reading it.
We're on the same page. So everybody out there, this is Bill's book on Full Automatic. Fantastic read. Definitely something to give you perspective. And for all you people who have, sensitive feelings, read that book and you'll see what true stress is about. So my dear friend, it's been my greatest honor to have you on this podcast. very touching for me, and very meaningful for me. And just know there's at least one patriot here that I really appreciate what everybody has done like you. You are a true American, and I just want to thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I just want to thank you that putting it out there for veterans. It really means a lot, and it means a lot to the veterans themselves. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right, everybody, that's our show. Thank you for joining us on the Warrior Podcast with a true warrior today, Bill Taylor. We'll see you at our next podcast, and remember, there is a warrior inside us all. Take care, everyone.